Right, as some people may know me, a lot of people probably don't, I'm the project manager for the residential red zone flatlands, so working in the Waimak area across the central city. I don't have a lot to do with the Port Hills project, but have an overview of that project as well. So the flatlands area is pretty big, sits on 636 hectares, just over 7,000 properties that are now Crown owned, and of those, a lot of those properties were significantly damaged from the earthquakes, and that's right across the whole area there. The Port Hills, it's pretty vast if you were to put it in a zone. There's multiple zones in the Port Hills, and I think there's about 27 actual patches in the Port Hills, which covers a total of 200 hectares and approximately 450 properties, with settlements still occurring out there. So you can see by the red dots on the map, we've got the Waimak area at the top, with Pines Karaki being the slither, and then Kaiapoi and into Brooklands, and then the Christchurch City piece with South Shore down the side, and then the Port Hills, as you can see over there, actually takes up a fair bit of little dots across the map, right round into the Governor's Bay and different areas around Sumner and Redcliffs as well. So the land clearance project that we carry out, we go through the process of individual property clearance. So in that we carry out a lot of pre-checks, works to get us into the state where we have a bare piece of land. Then we work through the vegetation retention process, through the vegetation retention methodology. We have qualified arborists out there checking all our trees and all our vegetation, making sure they meet the criteria, and then maintaining those through the vegetation clearance program. The interim land treatment program follows in right behind that, which you can definitely see happening out in the red zone in rather a large way at the moment, where we go through and tidy up the land left behind and then move into the land management phase. So the Crown owned property clearance, as I just said, that we go through that. That house is actually on Avondale Road, so we go through those properties, check them for all the hazardous waste, check them for any other hazardous materials like asbestos and clear that out, then go through the property and clear it. Then we move into those next phases. So in regards to demolitions, we've cleared, as of March, 6,458 properties. About 92% of what we've got. We're sitting on around about just over 500 left to go by the end of our project. So this has occurred over a 3-year period, and I think a lot of people have seen the drastic increase in clearances in the last 12 months, particularly up to the date we are. We've increased by at least 3,000 in the last year. So to get over the line to start with, it was reasonably slow with settlements and insurance settlements. Year 2 started to beef up, and then year 3 has definitely been the year that we've made some really good progress out there. So 582 remaining, which again today's a lower number. As every day goes by, that number decreases. And then after that we have the area-wide land treatment that goes through. During our demolition program, we've relocated a lot of houses. There's still houses being relocated out there. And if you've flown into Christchurch recently, which I did 2 weeks ago, you can see there's 2 house parks to a certain degree at Yaldhurst, full of houses. I think there's one on the backside of West Melton as well. So those houses are generally waiting to go somewhere or waiting to be relocated. So it's either a full relocation or they're flat packing those houses, as well as the salvage of the houses. So in the early days, there was a lot of aluminium windows were taken to the North Island, double glazed and single glazed. There's been Remu flooring and carry flooring taken out of the houses. Bricks been salvaged for earthquake repairs, and a lot of the internals have been salvaged out of those houses as well. You know, kitchens, hot water cylinders, doors, bathroom fittings. It's actually quite amazing what people will salvage out of a house and reuse. You know, two shower linings, which don't have a huge cost, but if you can reuse it out of an old one, it saves it going to the recovery park. So the interim land treatment, the reason we do interim land treatment is really to improve the visual look of the land. We work through that process of demolition and then move on to land treatment phase. Most of the Crown owned land will be grassed and it'll be in that park-like state, which we currently have a fair bit of the land in at the present time, particularly in the Waimak area, which is streaks ahead of the Christchurch area. And that gives us an ability to maintain that land in a cost-effective state, waiting for the future use decisions. As well as grasslands, we also have wetland and dune areas as well, so wetland areas in the low-lying areas and the natural wet areas, which will be planted out, and then the dune treatment and estuarine edge along the South Shore area. There's some in Kaiapoi as well as Pines Beach. This is Pages Road, which has just been completed just recently, so that's our interim land treatment stage. The vegetation removal has been done. That area was, if people can remember 4 years ago now, that Pages Road was pretty badly damaged by the earthquakes. We've been through there, tidied up the vegetation, gone through again and tidied up the land works behind us, and in the very top, for you guys would be the right hand corner, you can see the grass coming away there. Now the last 2 weeks of the light drizzle and the warm ground temperatures have helped with that, and we've got drastic grass growth out there now, which is good to see. So we're progressing pretty well through this project. At the moment, we've got 15% cleared and into grass space. We've got about 90 hectares of the 600 currently out for tender, then to be followed by the next 90 hectares until we get it finished. So by around about September, we should be at 50% of grassland, followed along by 100% of that land changed over by March 16. So over the next year, our demolitions are going to drop off drastically while that project runs out into June this year, and we'll follow on with some area-wide bulk earthworks to get the land in an interim state. With the vegetation retention, it's always a hot topic. So we look for the significant and healthy vegetation out there. There's no carte blanche, let's go and fell everything, although there is a lot of stuff that happens outside of our control, whether it's owners adjacent to us that are making their vision a bit better, or whether it's other activities causing that. We include most of the native trees in the retention, and we include a lot of vegetation that's outside of the retention methodology. So everything that meets the retention methodology is actually mapped on a GIS system. So we have the massive map of the red zone with a heap of dots on it. Every tree has an identified number, and from that we can pull a list of what vegetation we have, what its height was when we last mapped it, and information like that, as well as what stage it's in. So now, a few years in, after that project started, we can look back at the trees that are starting to decline and see what they were like originally, and see if there's a reason for them declining, or if they were in decline to start with. Then we end up with the finished result once we're finished. So we've been through this area. This is opposite Porritt Park in Wainoni. So we've been through there, we've done the vegetation removal, we've done the built structure clearance, and done the grassing in here just prior to Christmas. So that area now is looking really good. It's come up to a pretty good finished standard, a lot like the other areas at Pines, Karaki, and areas around New Brighton Road as well. Once that's happened, we're then into this interim land management phase, and that phase is really just the maintenance of the land as the custodian until such time as the future use decisions are made. And while we're in that stage, we're still monitoring our vegetation asset, we're still monitoring the land to make sure it's maintained in a safe and cost-effective way, and really looking after it as the custodian until those future decisions are made about what's going to happen with the area. So really, as I said, the highly visible areas are going to be maintained a bit more. The lower areas at the top end of blocks will be to a lower standard, but it'll graduate off just like the vegetation and the land treatment works does as well. And then during that, we've always got this dreaded thing being the pest plants and weeds. We're working with our local councils to make sure that we have a combined approach there. If we looked at Dudley Creek, we as the landowner on one side have an issue, the council on their side has an issue, so we like to work together with those councils and make sure that we're not sending two crews out to do the same job on the same day. We work together and make sure we're completing that works together. With our security teams, we've still got a 24/7 security presence out in the red zone. We still have the same level of security we had at the start. We haven't knocked that off at any stage to reduce it. As the houses reduce in the red zone, we've kept it at the same level. We're finding that what we have out there, as the houses clear, obviously the security risk goes back to just the houses that are left. But we're not finding anything increased out there. We're actually finding things dropping off. As we fence areas, the dumping slows down and if not, stops. And funnily enough, when we fence areas, they'll go to where the fence stops and dump it where the fence isn't, right beside the fence, which is quite ironic, but it seems to be this natural thing that happens, that people will dump on an area that's not fenced, won't dump on an area that's really fenced. It does happen occasionally, but not much. And then our security patrols are out there, as I say, 24/7, 2 guys driving around as well as our internal staff driving around during the daylight hours, and then our internal security team as well, carrying out those patrols, and still catching people out there completing illegal things, whether they be private or commercial operators. And that's me. Thank you.
Kia ora, I'm Evan Smith, as Chrissy said, and I'm Program Manager for Eastern Vision. For those of you that aren't aware of who Eastern Vision is, it's a small group of community leaders from the eastern side of town, and we convened to assist communities to create a big picture integrated plan for the recovery of the eastern flatland suburbs. So we're not including the hills here. Our main area of focus is between Ferry Road and Lower Styx Road and east of Marshall and Fitzgerald Ave. We want to create a plan, or assist communities to create a plan that everyone supports, that everybody can buy into. So it's important that the community is very involved in that process, and that a plan that is sustainable, that will still be around in 100 years' time. So it looks at the long-term future, not just the short-term future. We don't claim any mandate from community to do this. We're just very passionate about seeing it happen. One of our biggest tools in this process, I guess, has been a consultation application that's online called EvoSpace that we built, or had built last year, and we went public with it in the third quarter of last year to try and collate all the proposals that have come from the community for the recovery of the eastern suburbs. And here we're not just talking about the red zone land, but also the surrounding communities and green spaces and facilities that surround the red zone as well. So that it's important to see the red zone lands in context of, and so that whatever happens there is integrated with what else is happening around it in the general area. So we designed it to collate all those proposals, and it's become an archive of those proposals. We didn't say what could be on there, what couldn't be on there. We didn't filter those proposals, and that was to ensure that we gave everyone a fair shot at getting some feedback. So the main function of the website was to ensure that we could get as much feedback as possible from communities about what they thought on the various proposal options. And then we use that to analyse the data to create a map of community aspirations. What is it the community at this point in time would like to see happen in the red zone lands and in the eastern suburbs in general? We started off with 27 proposals that are mapped out there. They are ones that had already come out from the community. By the time we'd finished, because we'd invited people to suggest any other proposals that were unique, we ended up with 44 proposals dotted throughout the east. Some of them better than others, for sure, but that was up to the community to decide as far as we were concerned. We wanted their feedback on them. None of these proposals have been technically tested. We don't know whether they're feasible technically. We don't know whether they're feasible in terms of a business case or financially or whatever. But it's really just to see what kind of community mandate each of them had. The proposals roughly fall into 4 groups. Those around revitalising coastal New Brighton, and just as a taste of this, not going to go into any great detail, these are some of the proposals that are out there. Revitalising the CBD in New Brighton, a variety of different proposals in a variety of different areas. Second grouping was around creating the east as or reinventing it as the aquatic playground of the city and the region. And there's a number of various aquatic recreational facilities proposed, some of which are council outside the red zone, and some of which are who knows, who might be leading. Example of those, of course, you would have heard about the International Flatwater Sports Lake, white water course for kayaking and rafting, a wave garden or surf park, cable wakeboard park, hot saltwater pools for the New Brighton, and the Eastern Recreation Sports Centre, which has just recently been given the go-ahead to progress in the old QE2 site. We need to consider all of these different things to see how they integrate together in terms of a total package. The third grouping of proposals is around restoration of natural environment, which is particularly relevant to the NERP. And here you see a variety of different things from the construction of wetlands throughout the red zone area for water management, whether it's stormwater cleansing or flood retention basins, etc. Eco-sanctuary proposals to restore Mahinga Kai throughout the whole corridor, but specifically focused initially on this one exemplar project, which is underway already because it's on council reserve land within the red zone rather than Sarah-owned land, something we can start on already. Eden New Zealand project, which you may be aware of, at the point when this consultation went out, that wasn't very well defined, and that's reflected, I think, in some of the feedback. Natural playground network came in late in the piece. Somebody suggested this, and it really took off. It had a lot of life, a lot of support from communities. People wanted to see a return or the use of natural environment for play rather than using colourful plastic. And a Riverside Heritage Garden Park. The fourth grouping was around connecting communities and creating connected communities. They range from reconfiguration of education with new schools and how they might be better interface with the community, new community centres, retaining community hubs that were part of schools that are closing and how that might look in the future. Food growing networks, it's become quite popular, and that's not just organic gardening but also fruit trees and the like. Eastern Cycle and Walkway Network was the top most popular proposal of everything that was put up there. That's both recreational and commuter networks, and very important, the local networks to get children from their homes to their school safely. Riverside cafes, and second most popular was the Avon-Otakaro River Park, which is about returning most of the red zone into a naturally restored environment that meets a diverse range of community needs. There was a couple of late entries that didn't go down too well. Turning the whole of the red zone into a lake, we allowed that to be up there, and it got a large amount of negative feedback, as did the Avon Aviation Park. It didn't fly, but we'll come on the feedback a bit more in a moment. In terms of the level of engagement, we had 1,500 or so respondents, and they jointly put in about 3,500 distinct responses with respect to different proposals. The gender balance was fairly balanced, and the age range was quite diverse. That's I won't bother doing this again. This wee graph here, sort of bell curve with the majority of the people in that middle age group between 35 and 60, but we did have people as young as 9 and 10 putting feedback, and as old as people in their 90s. In terms of ethnicity, we don't think this mechanism that we used actually was representative, fully representative in terms of ethnicity. 87% respondents identified as European, only 4% Maori, and 5% other, which included Pacific peoples and Asian people. What we did notice is that for non-Europeans, quite often they would register but then not put feedback on, so something was stopping them in that process, and I can indicate what that might have been in a moment. In terms of disability, 6% of the respondents identified as having a disability, and we asked people where they lived prior to the first earthquake in 2010 and where they lived in 2014. And there was a broad distribution of locations that people lived in 2010 and in 2014 in terms of respondents. For the 2010, it was 54% lived in the east. In terms of 2014, it was 57%. Other way around, sorry, 57, then 54. What was very noticeable was that there was a large amount, that disguised a large amount of migration out of the east for many people, which is what you'd expect, but there's also an enormous amount of migration into the east post-2010 and by 2014 amongst the respondents. So there was actually only a net loss from the east of 3%. But only 8% of those that responded were actually red zoned themselves, which was quite an interesting statistic. We had difficulty, I think, reaching out to those people through the different mechanisms we used. And we did have workshops way out in Rolleston as well as Kaiapoi, but they weren't very well attended. One of the first things that people were asked to do was to rank 9 different guiding principles for the recovery of the East. Now these are summarised in the text here, but generally speaking, the highest ranking one was the most important guiding principle, if you like, was to keep communities safe from natural hazards in the future. And also build back clean, green and sustainable, and build strong connected communities. 3 powerful priorities as far as the communities were concerned from the respondents. What was ranked quite low there was affordable housing, which was quite strange because that was quite an issue for quite a few people. But the striking thing was that there there was very little appetite to reclaim red zone land for residential use. And also, there was not a great priority put on keeping costs down for whatever happened in the red zone. We also offered the opportunity for people to exclude principles, saying that this shouldn't be part of the guiding principles at all. And over 2/3, or just under 2/3 of the respondents actually excluded reclaiming the red zone land for residential use in their responses. That indicates to us there's quite a lot of, there's very limited appetite to actually do that amongst the people that responded. In terms of how much agreement there was from respondents for particular proposals, we gave that a figure between 1 being strongly disagreed with it to 5 being strongly agreed, and average it out for each proposal. So that gives us a way of ranking how popular proposals were in terms of agreement. And there's a range down the left-hand side, I'm not sure if you can all read it there, in terms of what came out on top, and the ones at the bottom were the ones with strong disagreement for, and they're the ones I indicated before, the aviation park and the bluing the red zone. I'll come back to those in a moment, because what we've done is use that information then to plot out what the most popular aspirations for the community were and on a map basis. We also asked for feedback on how frequently people would use those different proposals, and that roughly reflected the popularity of them, but there were some significant differences there. But generally speaking, if it was something that people agreed with, it would be something that they used quite frequently. Other aspects of the feedback that we measured was asked people if they valued a proposal sufficiently that they're prepared to pay some money or extra money out of their rates or their taxes to fund it in the future. And we found that the top 8 or so proposals, people were prepared to pay between $5 to $40 per annum extra in a targeted rate or tax to make sure that that happened. We also asked people if they liked where we'd cited things and asked them to relocate them on the map if they felt that it was better located somewhere else. Only 4% of the feedback indicated some level of relocation. A lot of it was just extending the region that we'd indicated. The two exceptions to that was the whitewater course and some of the other ancillary aquatic recreational proposals were deemed to be better located further south toward the Gayhurst Bridge area but still associated with the Flatwater Lake. And also, in the meantime, of course, the proposal to get a dual campus single-sex high schools in the east, relocate them, has been now located in the QE2 site, the old QE2 site, rather than where we put it as a placeholder on the Shirley Golf Course. That was to provoke some discussion about what should be happening to all the golf courses out in the east, and I think that discussion still continues. We also noticed a wee bit of bias from single focus campaigns. The rowers were quite strong campaigners and did a blitz, put feedback on just the two versions of the lake, which possibly skewed that result a wee bit, but there was some evidence of some slight skewing as well from other things, but we had enough evidence there to be able to analyse that. So as a result, we've come out with this map of community aspirations, which lists the top most popular proposals and how they might be integrated and fit together. So the ones at the top there, you'll see Eastern Cycle and Walkway Network, which is that network of cycle and walkways throughout the whole corridor and extending into the communities with laterals all the way along. The City to Sea River Park, Natural Playground Network, New Wetlands, very popular, which was quite surprising in some ways, because I think 2 years ago, if we'd said that, it may not have been the same result. I think people are becoming a lot more aware of the need for that and the importance of wetlands. Fenced Eco Sanctuary, International Flatwater Sports Lake, at the international length, the 2.2k rather than the smaller length. Community Food Growing Network throughout the region. New Brighton revitalisation with the CBD being reconfigured and reinvented. Eastern Sport and Recreation Centre, relocated out at QE2, and the Hot Saltwater Pool Complex, the Riverside Heritage Garden Park, and the Mahingakai Exemplar Project, ranked high as well. Other ones there that we've indicated are kind of ancillary, is around the Whitewater Course, the Wave Garden, the Cable Wakeboard Park. One surprise was the Eden New Zealand project didn't gain a lot of traction. because it wasn't very well specified at the time. It was also at the time located in the Avon Loop area, which is between Fitzgerald and Barbados Street. That's now being explored as being perhaps in the Avonside Loop, which is just to the north of Retreat Road. So that's what we would say is our first take on the community's feedback. In terms of how that differed from what Sarah did and what no doubt Simon's going to tell us about in the Waimakariri, is that the process for on Evo Space was led by the community rather than by a government agency, and it related to the whole area, not just the residential red zone. So it was about an integrated plan for the whole of the region. It also acknowledged the work and the proposals that had already been done to date by communities. So we didn't go out with a blank canvas. We said, here are the ideas that have already come out. What do you think of them? And we also, because of that registration process, we collected demographic information which allowed us to determine who actually had responded, who was missing from those respondents, where the gaps were, what we could do better next time in terms of making sure we had a representative sample. So it's a bit more validated, robust and meaningful from our point of view. But what that did is also restricted the sample size. If the broader you go, or the less information you want to collect, the broader you can make it. And that's me, basically. If you want to log on, you can still log on to Evo Space. The email address is, the URL is there, and you can access all of the feedback, or the analysis report and the documentation and the maps online, and Avon Otakarau Network's email website is also there. In terms of where we go from here, you'll be aware that Sarah is contemplating a consultation exercise on the different red zone areas in Christchurch. We're working or liaising with them on a regular basis to see how that might shape up. But Eastern Vision is doing planning its own next steps and its own consultation, community-driven consultation processes as well. So there's more to this than what's here now. Okay, thank you.
Kia ora tātou. I just want to give you a bit of an update. I'll paint a little bit more background for Waimakariri. Some of you may be less familiar with that. I'm not so much interested in the substantive issues, but I'm trying to, through these slides, illustrate aspects of our process that are pointers or particularly relevant, or things not to do in relation to Christchurch and what you've got on. Like Christchurch, but particularly focused in Kaiapoi and the Pines Kairaki communities, really got walloped in September, less so in February. So liquefaction, lateral spread. So that led to widespread liquefaction in Kaiapoi and Pines and Kairaki, which in turns those yellow areas pretty much approximate the red zone. So about 25% of the housing in Kaiapoi was red zoned, and about 40% of the town centre was lost. 100% in Kairaki, and about 60% of the Pines beach settlement was red zoned. This was a while ago now, and Tim and his team have made a lot more progress, but this is the Kaiapoi East red zone area in the foreground, TC3 area that is remaining, and in the further out towards the Kaiapoi River, the progressive process of removal of homes and the process that Tim outlined, but just to give you a bit more orientation. It's a pretty nice place in and around the town centre and the river, and the significance of it and the opportunities, like in Christchurch, are central to both our planning and also thinking about compatible and reuse of red zone area adjoining it. There are a couple of other projects we have running in relation to the river and the riverbanks. So we've got a particular, given that the riverbanks aren't part of the red zone, and the red zone immediately adjoins it, we've got a riverbanks group with development and redevelopment and restoration, given a lot of facilities there got knocked about. And also we've got a project running in relation to the river itself, a long issue in the Waimakariri community about environmental quality and restoration of the Kaiapoi River. I think one of the things for us was about timing in terms of when to begin to address the issue of future use, and the community needs to be in a space that they are going to be able to devote time and energy to this. This slide represents progress in terms of our rebuild, particularly around town centre and public facilities. But if you are still deep in the process of insurance settlements, or you're still wondering whether your town has a future, then your preparedness and both emotional space and intellectual energy to engage around the longer term future is compromised. So it's just a flag around timing. And the other aspect from our point of view was this is a rebuilt elderly person's housing, so we wanted to get our people out of the red zone before we started engaging about the future use of the land that they were still inhabiting and living on in elderly persons housing units. So this is the rebuilt accommodation. We opened that in the middle of last year to get our folk out. So our starting point as a council, rather than as part of community engagement process, is collecting our thoughts and issues as an infrastructure provider. So this is a schematic of the infrastructure issues as we understand them as the local authority in relation to red zone. And I'm not going to go into that in any great detail, but it is an important step for the councils to particularly reflect on what are the infrastructure requirements that do bear on the red zone, not so much at this stage for future use of the red zone, but for restoration of services on a permanent basis to the neighbours. So immediately to the top of this, north of this red zone area is TC3, green zone. Those folks are going to be there for a long time. And the issue about their services and the fact that at the moment they're still driving through pretty unsatisfactory roading to get home and to the shops and such like is central at the moment, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. So this is a map of options that we are currently engaging with, particularly with the green zone community, about in terms of long-term restoration of roading, given that they are in a sense cut off in many ways, and you've got cul-de-sacs that are partly left. So that is a significant issue from their point of view, and certainly from our understanding, and it is part of the recovery journey. So until your the road to your front door is normal, quote unquote, then that's part of the journey that you're on. And my broad understanding, Christchurch City Council are in a similar position in reflecting on infrastructure requirements. That is not to say that they take omniscient first place, but they are an important consideration as part of the future use mix. So, of course, when you look at options come with different advantages and disadvantages and different cost profiles. And that's just there are 5 different ways of skinning the cat in terms of giving long-term sustainable roading service to an area that is now geographically somewhat isolated. Just one other area, this is the Kairaki Beach area. This has the highest prevalence of retained properties on a proportionate and numerical basis. So of the 80 odd properties, about 20 have been retained. And that presents interesting challenges, and I'll come on to that in a minute, in terms of what that then means for future use. The kind of concentration of over here is the motor camp. So that's not in the red zone. We're in the process of rebuilding that camp slightly on higher ground from the lower to the upper, but that's an important local feature, and it's one of the central reasons, apart from access to the Waimakariri River mouth, for restoring roading in the red zone. Chrissy mentioned the Canvas engagement process, and so did Evan. So Sarah launched into that in the middle of last year over about a 6-week period, and produced a write-up of that and published that in December 2014, and we were obviously involved in that process. It illustrates one of the, when you go wide and you go general, then there's a couple of graphics there about levels of awareness, surveys immediately after the engagement period about levels of awareness in the Waimakariri community that process was on, and then the way they became aware. And I think that's going to be hugely challenging in the city in terms of what designing, if there is to be a wide-scale, community-wide engagement process, how to cost-effectively mount that, and then what do the views of that may be less strongly held by the wider community, how do you balance those with the views that are strongly held by immediately adjoining community and those with a strong interest in the red zone. All of those issues are before both the City Council and Sarah in that process. Sorry, that text is a little bit grainy. I only got a low-res copy of this from Sarah. Tim, sorry. But just if you can read that, designed to illustrate some of the different ways that the Canvas engagement process worked in terms of building awareness and then participation. And the process was essentially about 2 questions. Your views about what you want to see happen, thinking longer term, and then the issue of values and what's important to you. And both were reflected in the Evo Space exercise, but also both are relevant to understand driving values and concerns and issues, and then also your specific future use ideas. There was quite a lot of Sarah resourcing that went into generating awareness. I think that's going to be a challenge in the city in terms of, with all the other things that are going on, not just in terms of earthquake recovery, but the challenges that face the city, getting people who in a space and in a convenient way to participate and express views. You know, it's a crowded communication space. It's a very busy and challenging time in the future of the city. So that will be important to work through how to do that successfully, dependent upon really what the objectives are. Is the objective to reach every part of Greater Christchurch? Is the objective to focus on those who are in and around and with a particular interest in the east? Those questions are yet to be addressed, or in the process of being addressed. So this is a little bit of a flavour of the results. Firstly, about the values that underpin people's views of future use, and the wordle that just illustrates some of the key words that were prevalent in that regard. And I'm just going to flick through a couple of these fairly quickly, but just to illustrate the sort of range of issues and the predominant views that have been expressed. Then the issue of what should be happening, and like Evan, these are themed around 4, 5, 6 themes. Firstly, by far in the relation to the Waimakariri red zone areas, recreational opportunities, parks, and environment were key. Business and commercial, bearing in mind that we've got red zone areas immediately adjoining the Kaiapoi town centre and immediately either side of the Kaiapoi River, and both from a community point of view and from a council point of view, there are some real opportunities that are released in terms of supporting recovery of the town centre and the development of local business. And then it tailed down from there in terms of not to diminish the importance of the topics, but the number of ideas when you go wide in general, arts, culture, heritage, community and people. So that's that wide-scale engagement. We are expecting that the consideration of all of that feedback in association with our infrastructure material and with association with information about land capability will eventually lead to a series of another round of engagement that is rather more specific and pointed around capabilities in a land capability sense of the different red zone areas, potential future uses that are appropriate given that capability and given the direction and nature of community feedback, and then a more focused discussion about the future use in different areas. This at the moment, and I've got a couple of copies, also a few copies of each of these. We just this last week or so had street barbecues around roading options with Kaipoi East and South communities immediately adjoining the red zone about roading options in relation to them, and that was good to retouch, re-engage with the community, and remembering that these folks have been living right next to it and all that's been going on and wondering about their future, and that's been an overdue re-engagement from our point of view. We've placed in our long-term plan that we just released a bucket of money for future use. We have no specific knowledge about governance and financial arrangements from a government policy point of view at this time. That's a matter to be determined, but as a council going out with a 10-year plan, we felt we should at least put a placeholder. The numbers look extremely specific. That's because all the accountants have to inflation adjust all this stuff, but it started out as, crikey, that's about 6 million worth, and then there's some operational expenditure there. But we wanted to place in front of the community through our long-term plan process the fact that there would be rating implications of the council making a contribution for future use, even though at the moment it doesn't know specifically whether it will be responsible for any of that land or how much of it. An important, I stress, very important aspect, there are private properties, retained property in the red zone, and those owners retain all of their existing rights. And it's an important consideration in thinking about future use. So those are scattered, irregularly scattered. They will present, they do present for the council's really significant servicing issues, and for the configuration of future use also challenges. From our point of view, the basis for any kind of acquisition of those properties needs to be related. Is there a genuine public works purpose for doing that? And if there isn't, as a council, we don't have any basis to acquire them on a compulsory acquisition basis. And I'm not sure, I can't speak for the Crown obviously, but I don't think the Crown's in much dissimilar position under the law as it currently stands at the present time. So we are meeting with some red zone residents tonight in terms of their permanent long-term roading options, and that's a live issue that will be important in thinking about pattern of future use. So my last slide, it was encouraging from a small council point of view to have the government really prepared to dive in the middle of last year and put in a lot of resourcing into wide-scale community engagement. That was, and it's broad scale now, and it's not just once, and it will happen again. And I think that's been a really good signal from Sarah, the government, about future use and openness to ideas. That said, when you go broad scale and you go wide, one of the challenges is there are groups who have very specific plans. In our case, it's the Pines Kairaki Beaches Association, who have spent the last 2 to 3 years working on the plan for their community, and they're a 90-year-old community organisation, so they've got a very specific view. As I said, the timing needs to be right. Infrastructure is important. There needs to be agreement about what the land is capable of. The future will be different for different red zone areas, and possibly significantly different. You obviously, and as evident from Evan's consideration, the interrelationship between the red zone and the adjoining areas needs to be considered. Issues are clearly presented by retained properties for future use. The elephant in the room, if you like, is who's going to govern this stuff? Will it stay in Crown ownership or Crown management? How much of it will be vested in either a local authority or some other entity? How does all this stuff get funded? So there's a real interesting balancing act. There's clearly a desire to get on, to decide stuff now, make things happen. And we've got groups that are champing at the bit to get on and establish food forests and all good stuff. Versus deliberative process of planning. It's a unique opportunity. You get it once in a lifetime or once in a generation in a city, and we should be really bold. So that's the balancing act that both Evo Space, the community, the government and the council will be walking through in Christchurch over the next wee while. Thanks very much. I hope that's been of some interest.